Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you again for joining us today here at Belfast First Church of the Nazarene. And I always say good morning, and it's okay for you watching it, but for me, recording this during the week, knowing that we share it each Sunday morning, and saying good morning in that sense. But I'm always mindful that others could be watching this at any time, maybe at night time when they're putting it on and I'm saying good morning. But that's the reason for it. They pre-record it and we share them together as a church on Facebook and YouTube and all those outlets that we use. But it can be watched at any time as well. It's Thursday afternoon at 1:30 and I'm recording this. And I've had to switch the light on in the bedroom. It's so dark today. I'm trying to record this now in the wind, in the rain, there's hailstones, maybe snow out there as well. All of this is beating against the window as I'm recording this. So it's a dark, cold, damp day out there. But I do hope each of you have had a good week this past week. Hopefully none of you have been out walking on Thursday and got caught in that bad weather. But I do hope you're all keeping safe and well just in these days that we're in. And we're praying that God will continue to be with us each day as we get through these difficult times together. I want to share today from the New Testament, Luke chapter 15. And this chapter tells us of 3 different parables. Now, for maybe those of you watching who don't know what a parable is, it's simply, and I remember learning this from my Sunday school days, and it's always stuck in my head. A parable is an earthly story with a heavenly meaning. An earthly story with a heavenly meaning. Luke chapter 15, we will read about the parable of the lost sheep, the lost coin, and the lost son, or the prodigal son, as you may be more familiar with. And the prodigal son, the story of the prodigal son is what I want to look at today for a moment. A man has 2 sons, and one day, just out of the blue, the younger son approaches his father and he says, "Dad, is there any chance you could give me my share of my inheritance?" Now, I'm sure this took the father by surprise. The sons weren't really entitled to this until the father one day would die, and then the land and the money and property and so on would be given to the sons. But the young son asked his father here for his inheritance, and the father lovingly gave him what he asked for. And then what happens next? The young son left home. He ran away and he spent his money on wild living and partying, on prostitutes. He just thought he was loaded. He was living his life and there were all these friends around him and he was just getting up to all sorts of things. But then one day, every penny he had ran out. He squandered a lot. His property, his money, everything he had, he lost it all. His so-called friends he had around him, they all disappeared as quickly as his money did. They were using him. They seen someone who was loaded and they could use him to get what they needed, and then off they went. Now he was left with nothing. He was lonely. He was lost. He was hopeless. He was broken. And the only place he could return to was back home again. In sheer desperation, he went to one of the local farms and he hired himself out to feed the pigs, and he got nothing for it. And he was so hungry that nobody gave him nothing, and he was eating the scraps that the pigs were feeding on. This is how low he had got. And it was in this moment, in these times as he was feeding pigs, where he plucked up the courage one day that he was going to go home to his father. And I'm sure he battled hard with this one. What's my father going to think when he sees me? He's every right to disown me. But surely if I go back home, if my father doesn't want anything to do with me, surely some of his servants will see me and they'll see the state I'm in and they'll take pity on me. And maybe some of the food that they're even throwing into the bin, they could give that to me. I'm going to go home and I'm going to tell my father how sorry I am for messing up. I haven't only let my father down, but I've let God down as well. And I'm going to say to my dad, I'm no longer worthy to be called your son. That's how bad and how low he felt. And he was expecting the worst. He was thinking all what was going to happen when he returned home. And the exact opposite happened. I could just picture this story from being a father myself. I'm sure his father looked out from the house every single day when the son was away, expecting that one day for the son to come home again. And this is what happened. On this particular day, the father looked out and he saw his young son from a distance, and he just knew it was his son. And he didn't wait for the son to come home and knock on the door or shout for his dad. He ran across the hills to meet his son. And he threw his arms around him. He kissed him. He hugged him. And he said, "Son, come back home. We're going to kill the best animal that we have. We're going to eat that. And we're going to have a big celebration because my son, who I thought was dead, is now alive again. You were lost, but now you're found." A fascinating story of a prodigal son, a lost son going and squandering everything and returning home to be greeted by his father's love and compassion. But today I want to look at this young man's big brother for a moment and look at his side of the story. He was out working in the fields and he hears this party going on in the house. He hears the music and he gets close to the house. He sees the dancing and all the commotion and he wonders what on earth is going on in there. And he maybe thought, have I forgot somebody's birthday or an anniversary or something? Am I going to go into the house and feel embarrassed for forgetting something like that? In Luke chapter 15, verse 25, and we'll pick up the story where the big brother enters the scene. Meanwhile, the elder son was in the field. When he came near the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the servants and asked him what was going on. "Your brother has come," he replied, "and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has him back safe and sound." The elder brother became angry and he refused to go in. So his father went out and pleaded with him. But he answered his father, "Look, all these years I've been slaving for you and never disobeyed your orders. Yet you never gave me even a young goat so I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours, who has squandered your property with prostitutes, comes home, you kill the fatted calf for him." "My son," the father said, "you are always with me. Everything I have is yours. But we had to celebrate and be glad, because this brother of yours was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is now found." The fact there were two brothers mentioned in this story is not incidental. It's important to the teaching of this parable. In this one parable, we can learn so many stories from it. We can learn a lot about this. And the younger brother, of course, can represent the everyday people, sinners who are far away from God, God the Father. Sinners who who repent and turn back to follow Christ. Whereas the big brother here is an illustration of the religious Pharisees of that day. The Pharisees who were always criticizing Jesus for everything that he done. Always criticizing Christians for everything they did. The two brothers in this parable can also represent and illustrate the two different types of sins. The sins of the flesh and the sins of the spirit. The young son, as I've already mentioned, he got involved in wild living. He gave in to the desires of his flesh. And he squandered everything. And his life turned into one big, lonely mess. His big brother kept his body clean. He kept his life clean. He listened to all his father's commands. He worked hard. But he was still a sinner. The Apostle Paul writes in 2 Corinthians 7 verse 1, "Let us cleanse ourselves from all filthiness of the flesh and spirit." The oldest son may not have been guilty or shown signs of sinning in the flesh, but when we read his reaction, his spirit was so sinful. He was so sinful in spirit that he couldn't even call his brother his brother. He said to his father, "Your son." And here there's a great lesson for Christians living today, and how we need to take heed and be very careful in our own lives. In God's eyes, the sins of the spirit are just as bad as the sins of the flesh. Maybe even in some ways they can possibly seem worse. The Pharisees were a religious group. They were morally clean. They stuck to every diet and cleansing law that there was. But they were so arrogant and proud, people couldn't stand them. They criticized everything that Jesus did. The big brother was faithful and he always did what his father asked. But one thing he failed to do was to display his father's love. He was hateful, resentful, he was unforgiving, he was full of pride, he was self-centered. He demanded special treatment and attention, and he gave off when things didn't go his own way. Publicly, he was quick to announce the sins of his young brother instead of showing love and forgiveness, just like his father did. His brother was dead and was now alive. He was lost, now he was found. It was worth celebrating, wasn't it? Well, not to his big brother. He was so full of the sins of his spirit. David prayed in Psalm 51 verse 10, "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me." What more could we desire as Christians? A clean heart and a renewed and a right spirit within us. Perhaps today, some of us may be watching and we feel a bit like the big brother. We may live a good life, we may be religious, we may go to church, we may have a faith, and maybe we don't sin very much in the flesh, which is good, but maybe deep down we have anger issues, we have resentment in our hearts, we have bitterness, maybe there's unforgiveness in our hearts. Our spirits may even be full of pride. Today, let us all pray for God to forgive us, to create and to renew a right spirit within us, so we too, like our Father, will be full of love and compassion for everyone around us. so we will be Christ-like in all that we say and all that we do, as we live our lives serving our Saviour. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right, steadfast, and renewed spirit within me, so that everything I do will display the love and compassion and the beauty of God, my Father. May God bless you all today. Thank you for watching. Take care. God bless.